Well, it was not my idea to become the chaplain at the largest men's prison in Maryland. It was not. But I was asked, first of all, as soon as the last chaplain left, I was asked, first of all, by Marcus. He was an inmate, and he was the pastor of the large church that's behind the wall. There's a 600-man church, very vibrant Protestant church behind the walls, and he asked me to apply. And then somebody who was a pivotal part of the administration asked me to apply, and then my pastor said he thought I should. And I thought to myself, are they crazy? I'm creative, I'm a free spirit, I can't be bound by bars. But then I told them all that I would pray, and when I did, I thought, oh no, I'm meant to do this. This is a God thing. And I felt like an old war horse just about to go into another battle. And I'm sure many of you have had the same kind of situation where you're facing something, you know it's going to be bloody, you know it's going to be difficult, but you charge in anyway. So I did. I applied and I got the job. But when I got there, Marcus and all the leadership of that chapel, who I knew because I'd gone regularly into services, I knew how the church worked, they had all been whisked away, they'd been moved to another prison. And the inmates, the congregation, they were grieving the loss of the last chaplain, who was an African-American man. He'd been there for 16 years and he'd started the church. So at the beginning and the end of the services, men would gather and they'd glower. And they'd say things like, I don't want a female chaplain. The word says that a woman should not have authority over a man. It's not right, don't want her. Well, in the end, I just got really fed up with this. And at the end of a service, I said, gentlemen, I think you might all know that the Lord has put a great love in my heart for you. And all over the room, men were nodding their heads because they knew it was true. And I said, I think you might know that within the confines of the law, I would do anything for you. And again, they were nodding their heads because they knew that was true also. I said, well, gentlemen, there's two things I can't do for you. I can't be a man and I can't be black, so get over it. And they had the grace to laugh too. But then the officers, the guards, they didn't want me either. I would go into the facility and I'd hear them saying, a woman shouldn't be the chaplain. It's not right. It's not good for safety. A woman should not be the chaplain. And if they'd say it to my face, which sometimes they did, I'd say, officer, it wasn't my idea. Take it up with the Almighty. But I realized that I had a problem because I couldn't change in the way they wanted me to. I couldn't be a man. So I thought, Geraldine, what have you got in your favor? And I thought, okay, I'm a maternal woman, I'm a mother figure, and many of those men have been raised by their mothers or their grandmothers. And I'm British, so I make a fabulous cup of tea. I thought, Mama, go with what you've got. And so I took an electric tea kettle into the prison, and I decided I was going to use that to build a community. And I made tea as often as I possibly could. On really cold nights, I'd race out to the compound where the officers were standing guard, and I'd say, officers, may I make you a cup of tea? I want to turn you all into Englishmen. And they'd smile, and eventually they softened. And then I made multiple cups of tea for the inmates, particularly the leadership. Now, I was training up a new leadership to take the place of the ones who'd gone, and often I'd have about 8 or 9 big burly men in my office, and I brought in lots of tea so they'd have the luxury of choice. And I'd say, Prince, what kind of tea would you like? Chaplain, you know what kind of tea I like. Oh, silly me, of course. You like lemon verbena with 2 sugars. Yeah. Manny, what kind of tea do you like? Chaplain, you know. Of course, how silly of me. You like blackcurrant with 3 sugars. Yeah. Big Mike, Chaplain. Oh, of course, you might like chamomile with 1 sugar. I made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cups of tea. But one day things changed. there was a young man called Michelin Man who was known as MM, and he really loved his mother. And then he found out that she was seriously ill. She was in hospital, and because of prison regulations, he couldn't phone her there. So I got him in my office, and I made a phone call for him on my private office line. Well, I got through to the nurse who told me that she'd just been taken down for an emergency operation. And incredibly, she patched me through to the operating room, so he was able to talk to his mother. And I heard him say, "I love you, Ma Bird." And he said afterwards that she'd replied, "I love you too, tweet, tweet." And that was their private love code. And that was the last time he spoke to his mother, because she died later that night. And he was devastated. And so I bent all sorts of rules, and I said to him, look, and he wasn't eligible to go to the funeral on the outside, so I said, we'll have a funeral of our own in my office at the same time as the one going on outside. Invite about 7 men who knew your mother. And he did. And they gathered in my office and they shared memories. Well, I really liked Ma Bird. She was a wonderful cook, and I loved it when she invited me round to your house for dinner. She was so kind. Ma Bird was so kind when my mother died. I'll never forget that. I'll always be grateful. Well, I saw her just a few weeks visiting you in the visiting room. And you know, MM, whenever I saw your mother, she always had a smile and a kind word for me, and I'll really miss that. And then they sang Amazing Grace in 3-part harmony, and my office became holy ground. And then I did something I wasn't quite sure whether they'd go for. I brought in little bottles of bubbles. And I said, I'm going to commit Ma Bird's spirit to the Almighty, but after that, why don't you blow bubbles? Why don't all of we do that? To symbolize her spirit leaving earth and joining heaven. And I said a prayer, and then one of the big, beefy men, he grabbed bubbles, he blew them, and he said, "Goodbye, Ma Bird." And someone on the other side of the room, muscles bulging, went, "Tweet, tweet." And then he blew bubbles, and then they all started to do that. "Goodbye, Ma Bird, tweet, tweet. Goodbye, Ma Bird, tweet, tweet." The whole room was filled with bubbles. They didn't want to stop blowing bubbles. It was funny and goofy and incredibly honoring. And it really was a turning point because well, I made them tea. You know, tea in England is a great, it's known as the cure for shock. Tea with a lot of sugar. So I made them all tea. And that time was a turning point, that whole funeral. Because when I look back, I realized that news about it went all over the prison. And that we started to become a community from that time, a community that loved and laughed and worshipped together. And I knew that everything had changed because of the segregation unit, the SEG unit, which is the prison within the prison. Men are locked up in there for 23 hours a day, and they spend a lot of their time with their face against the bars looking out at the compound, and there's continuous catcalls from anyone who walks past. No one exempts, not if you're a granny, not if you're a minister. The commissioner walked past one time and someone cried out, "Nice ass, commissioner!" And he just went, "Thank you so much, I've been working out." But after that funeral, whenever I passed by, there was absolute silence. The men were honoring me in the way that they knew best to do it. But one time someone cried out, "Chaplain, will you bless us?" And oh, it was my privilege and my great honor to pray a blessing over all of those men, no matter what faith group they came from. Well, I left the prison some years after that. A new leadership, a strong one, had been raised up, so my work was done. And I felt like that old warhorse from the beginning. I was emotionally battered and bruised and absolutely exhausted. But I learned such a lot from the men. And then I also discovered something that British women have known for eons. And that is that you can't keep a good mama down, especially not if she makes a killer cup of tea. Thank you. Thank you very much.